Welcome back to another very special Interview Wednesday here on Turnbuckle Trash Talk. I am the officiant, Kent, and joining me at this time is a name you may not have heard yet, but you definitely will in the coming future. This is Logan Cruz, recent graduate from the Lethal Academy in Tampa Bay. Thank you so much for joining me, Logan. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, yeah.
So I want to talk to you about what has been a short but already pretty illustrious career for you. And I want to take it all the way back to how you got into wrestling and how you even first discovered it.
Okay.
So let's start at the very beginning. What was the first wrestling memory you ever had?
A lot of people who are in the wrestling business, a lot of them have that experience when they're younger with like their family introducing them to wrestling, but I didn't have that. I actually didn't discover wrestling until I was like maybe 8 or 9, something like that. I remember I was at my grandmother's house watching TV with her, and I saw a commercial from Monday Night Raw, and I was like, what is this? I was like, I gotta get in on this. So I kind of had to develop into it myself, and I got the rest of my family into it, and then I was like, you know what, I want to try that out. So
Did you find yourself quickly becoming a fan of any particular wrestlers, or were there any people who like really had an impact on you or an influence on you?
In the beginning, I was pretty generic kind of fan. So like the Randy Orton, Triple H, but then the late nights watching YouTube and stuff like that, like Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, those kinds of guys, and then I started discovering like the independent wrestling, because that's a whole nother world.
Yes.
So then guys like Jay Lethal, obviously not to name drop, but but yeah, I say Dean Malenko, he's always been my favorite wrestler, but it doesn't reflect when I'm in the ring. Like you can't.
Yeah,
really,
you didn't necessarily get influenced by his style per se, but
Right.
like he's also just very methodical. He thinks a lot about psychology. He has a certain presence and a very when he comes out, you're like, this guy's a badass. Like,
Right.
He's coming out to fight if he's there. So
Exactly. Yeah.
What was there a particular instance or event that made you decide, okay, this is something I actually want to try and pursue? Or was there a moment, or did you just kind of always feel that way?
I would always joke around, and I would tell my mom, it was like one day that's going to be me, like when we were watching TV or something like that. And I'd grown up fighting, like very physical, like very, rough and tumble. And then my sister got into singing, and that was like her pursuing her dream. And I was like, you know what? If she can do something that she loves so much, there's absolutely no reason I can't do it as well. So I started researching schools, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this whether it's for, a year, or whether this goes the way I want it to and it takes me where I want to go. But I have to do it for me. That's
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, there's no other reason to do it other than for yourself, because if you go in with any other motivation of like, I'm doing it for the money, or I'm doing it for the fame, or I'm even doing it because I'm going to be in WWE, a reality check comes along eventually, and you're like, wow, everything hurts. I've made $0, and WWE seems even further away than ever. But pursuing your dream is so important. What made you decide to go to the Lethal Academy amongst all the other schools, and there are quite a few in Florida? What was the selling point for you on that?
Well, like I said, I grew up, I was a fan of Jay Lethal. So the inner fan of me was like, oh my God, Jay Lethal. But at the same time, there are a lot of wrestling schools around here, but I feel like there aren't as many where you are getting that hands-on approach from someone who is so far in the business. It's a lot of well-respected wrestlers who are training, and I take nothing away from them, nothing but respect. But it's like, Jay is the cream of the crop,
Well, he's on a short list of people who are one of the greatest wrestlers never to work in WWE.
Right.
And I think that is such a selling point, because you're like, this guy made it without being in the big dance, so to speak. I mean, TNA was hot for a while he was there, but he never really jumped into WWE, and I'm not sure that he ever will.
Right.
And it's such an amazing feat on its own. I mean, even to never be signed by AEW is a term that we're going to use eventually
Yeah,
too, because that's also kind of making it, and that took a lot of people like the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega out of the having never been signed to a big company
Right.
conversation, which makes that short list even shorter. What was the training process like for you? What did you find came really, really difficult? What came really easy to you?
As far as like a difficult moment in training, I'd always done, like I said, I grew up fighting, I grew up doing all that, so like the physicality of it wasn't too much for me. It was more when I was growing up, if I ever was hurt or something like that, my dad would always say to me, never let him see you sweat. So I think the hard part was then having to display that I was
Right, it's the emoting, it's the selling,
emoting,
it's
yeah. I like to think that I'm pretty good at selling my emotions maybe when I'm speaking, but with my actions when I'm in the ring, sometimes I do get kind of stony-faced because I'm like, the fighter in me is like, don't let him know that, you're tired or you're
Well, and
hurt.
that's kind of a character trait in its own. Like, I can see that being a gimmick, like a no-selling gimmick, basically. But that's really hard to get over with the guys in the back because it's a team effort.
Right.
You want to make them look good just as much as you want to make yourself look good and have them make you look good.
Right.
So it is a big challenge to adopt because there is this kind of alpha male belief out there that, again, never let them see you sweat, never let them see you in pain.
Right.
And there's definitely some validity to that. But there's also a drawback in a sport such as wrestling where it's so important to go not just to what you feel you should express, but beyond that,
Right.
because you're selling to an audience instead of just your opponent.
Yeah, turn it up to 11.
What was really easy for you throughout the process? What did you find like you got in the ring and you were just like, this is easy?
Bumps actually came really easy.
Really?
I scared the hell out of Jay Lethal and Merc the first time we were learning bumps because they were like, yeah, you're teaching your body to do something that it's not supposed to do. And I don't know why, but something in me was just like, oh, yeah, I got to slam my body into this mat. And I just started destroying myself. And they were like, what is wrong with you? And I was like, what? They're like, why? Like, relax.
Well, that's one of the most difficult things that it was for me to overcome in training. And a lot of people I've talked to because it goes against every basic instinct in your body to purposefully throw yourself at the ground.
Right.
So to hear that came the easiest for you is actually really impressive, but also sounds pretty crazy if you ask me. What was it like training with Jay Lethal and David Mercury? What was your experience?
Well, to go back to a previous question about why I like the Lethal Academy was there's so many places that you see and they got the air conditioned rings and they got the the fancy setups and everything like that. When I started, and I think it's where you started too,
Absolutely.
It was in that tiny little shack up
Yep.
in
it was
up
literally
in
a
Tampa.
shed or a garage.
And
Yeah.
I loved that grittiness and the down home feel because it didn't feel like that to me said these guys aren't in this to try and make money off of us. They're in this because they want us to be good and they want to toughen us up. They want us to they want us to succeed. And if we have to do that in 90-degree heat with no air conditioning, then that's what we're going to do. And I am so thankful for that. But training with Jay and Merc, it was we coined the phrase for my class, instead of the Lethal Academy, the Lethal Apothecary.
I like that. Yeah, because Merc hadn't exactly started training once my class had kind of wrapped up
Right.
and moved on. So, yeah.
We were his first, like, real, as from what he tells us, his first consistently hands-on class. So it's like getting two sides of the same coin where you have someone who has made it as far as Jay and been as successful as Jay, and then you also have someone who, Mercury, who's still coming to the classes with us, and he's still coming, or he shows up to shows, and he's getting booked on the shows with us. But it was, the training period now is like 5 months. I think my class before we made it to advanced was like 9 or 10 months, something like that. We were in there 3 days a week. We were shaped by Jay and almost polished by Merc.
Yeah.
Is what I think. And Merc pushed us to sometimes Jay would be like, no, I'm not going to make him do the drills. And Merc would be like, no, they're doing those damn drills. And that's just something I'm really, really thankful for, is that we have two people who were so hands-on and so willing to get in the ring and roll around with us.
Well, and they're almost diametrically opposites in some ways, too, because like you just mentioned, Jay is not about blowing you up or making you work intensive drills or punishments / lessons, whatever you decide to call them. Whereas Merc seems very focused in kind of that old school mentality. So you're getting a little bit of the old school training style and a little bit of the new school training style. But you're also getting the perspectives of a guy who's been kind of out of the indies for a long time. And Jay, I mean, he's been on TV for, God, over 10 years now. Whereas you've also got Merc, who's still fighting, still grinding, still, headlining the indie scene. So you're getting a very much real perspective into someone who can say, this is what it's like today on the indie scenes versus this is what it was like when I was coming up 20 years ago.
And that's not to say that Jay didn't push us.
No, he definitely did it. But the whole
kicked our asses
the
a lot.
world could be different a year ago than it is today.
Right.
Imagine 20 years ago. There's stuff that's very similar, but there's still very much stuff going on that isn't the same. So there's that. What were you most excited for after you had finished training? What was the thing that you were most looking forward to getting onto the scene? Some people say it's the travel. Some people say it's working a particular promotion or a particular show. What were you looking forward to the most?
This is going to sound really, I was just happy to be there, honestly. Just to work shows in general, whether I was 5 minutes at the beginning of the night, or if I haven't had a main event yet, but if it was something higher up on the card, but just being able to be there and be in the ring and do something that I did put my time and effort into. And, that was the most fulfilling, and to be able to look back at the end of the day and say, hey, I did this. Right now, I think the biggest thing for me is just going as many places as possible. And so every time I get to work a new promotion, or someone reaches out to me, it's like, oh wow, they reached out to me. Like, that's cool. That's really, really cool. So just being able to go and, not for me, but to help put on the best show possible and do whatever it is that I need to do to help make the show good. That's what's exciting for me. Because if the show goes well, I can look back and say, oh, you know what? May have played a minor role, but I helped, I put a smile on someone's face today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We've come into an interesting part in your career because I feel like you're still very much in the midst of a creative kind of process in figuring it out. I mean, we've even had conversations like this before we started filming today about like who is Logan Cruz going to be? And that may not even be the final. I guarantee, in fact, that it won't be the final form. As we saw, even just as of a year ago, David Mercury took his character to a whole new level after having been in the business as long as he has. What is kind of your thought process in the creative process right now? Where do you see yourself going? What's going on in your head when it comes to creating Logan Cruz?
Well, it's very difficult in my mind to find a good gimmick and a good niche that hasn't been done, because it is a very oversaturated market right now. But I've heard it said a lot that the best characters and the best gimmicks are just you turned up to 11. So right now, I'm hoping that it'll come more naturally to me as time goes on, as I allow my mannerisms to start flowing a little bit more in the ring, because anyone who knows me outside of here knows that sometimes I'm a little out of my mind sometimes. But I'm hoping that that'll come more naturally to me in the ring as time goes on.
Well, and as more of those wrestling skills become second nature, as soon as they become instinctual and your body just knows what to do and you're not actively thinking like, okay, where do my hands go? Or like, where do my feet go? And trying to remember all that stuff, no matter how many drills you've done. Sometimes there's a difference in a show setting versus a practice setting where you're just like, oh God, I forgot how to do all of this. And then you have to remember. But I think as soon as that becomes second nature, like the selling comes easier and everything like that, because you can shift your focus onto whatever it is that you're trying to get better at.
Right.
So I want to ask you the 4 questions I ask everybody at the end of interviews now. It's become 4. It used to be 3, then it was 2 before that. But number 1, the wrestling landscape has completely changed right now with the introduction of AEW, with NWA kicking off, with Impact moving to Access. There's so much going on in the wrestling landscape. I want to hear what your perspective is about the landscape as a whole. Are you excited? Are you nervous? Just give me a full-on rundown of what you think's been going on.
Yeah, I think that right now wrestling is probably at its best, and if it's not there now, it's going to be very soon, just because competition breeds success.
Absolutely.
The only thing, I feel like the competition more is between the fans. Like, the fans are so divided, and it's kind of upsetting because success of one company is not mutually exclusive to another. Just because, the only head-to-head right now, I think, is what? AEW and NXT?
Yeah, pretty much.
But that doesn't, just for one to succeed, the other one doesn't have to do poorly. I think that it's more important to just enjoy wrestling, and if you don't enjoy something, then you don't have to watch it,
No,
you don't
absolutely.
but you don't have to also bring other people down for also watching it.
No, I think for the success of wrestling as a whole, we need to spread our love amongst all the companies. And it's, of course, a buyer's market. I'm not saying, watch something you're not going to enjoy.
Right.
But don't shame people for watching something that they
Exactly,
enjoy.
exactly.
And if you do have the ability to watch wrestling 5 days a week, why wouldn't you? If
Right.
you're a real fan of the sport, you're going to, no matter which company it is. I agree with you. I feel like the war is more between the fans. But two shows being on the same night, I do see why it's a battle for ratings. But I also see plenty of people who have both shows on at the same time.
Of course.
So it is, like I said, a buyer's market for a wrestling fan.
And it's not the 90s now. Like, you can record one show and then watch the other. It's not like you have to choose between the two.
Right. And I mean, how much do ratings even count anymore? It seems like they talk more about streams and like they'll decide 2 or 3 days later, okay, people watch the repeat and all this other stuff. Like,
Right.
the ratings themselves aren't the issue. It's the overall interest in the product. It's
Right.
the overall pursuit. So what misconceptions or illusions did you have about wrestling that once you finally got into the business were completely shattered or changed?
I cross my fingers when I say this. More so towards the beginning of training, we were told, it's very cutthroat, can be very political, and I have been very fortunate to not have experienced that yet, mainly because, I keep my head down, do what I need to do, shake everyone's hand and smile, but you meet these guys like the name drop, like Aaron Nova, Kiko Harris, these guys who are just so kind and just want the business to succeed, that when they see guys like me and I'm going to say Wheezy T, even though he didn't say my name once in his interview, my tag team partner, jerk. But they see guys like us and they're like, we want you guys to do well. They're going to come up to you afterwards, give you that criticism. They're not going to be like, oh, you did terrible, because they want to see you get better, because they love the sport. And again, for them to do well, we don't have to do poorly, and they understand that. So hopefully that doesn't change, and I hope that if I ever do get to a point where I'm in a position like them, that I look back and I remember, hey, these guys were awesome to us. Let me be, let me help these younger guys out if I am in a position where, I'm respected like that, hopefully. But yeah, that's been, I was nervous coming into it about that, but it's
No,
been
I
great.
mean, and you're not wrong to have that belief coming in. Wrestling still is a very dog-eat-dog world.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's trying to get bookings. Everybody wants to get paid. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, it's all about, what do you take home or take away from it. Mm-hmm. But I agree that it's nice to see that transition happening where you're seeing more wrestlers reaching out and trying to improve the business as a whole,
Right.
rather than the success of the individual. And I'm hoping that's only going to continue to be the case, like we were talking about with fans, like we were talking about with promoters. Like, I want more people in wrestling to work together,
Right.
because I think everyone can benefit. Everyone can make money. And as long as we're all worried about competing with one another as wrestlers, as promoters, as fans, nobody wins.
Right.
And it's funny because it's so contrary to the product we put on, which is all about competition, to say, like, no, we all want to work together, behind the scenes to make the competition good for everyone.
Right.
If you had to give a piece of advice to somebody who was interested in getting into the wrestling business, not that they're already there, but what would you tell them if they were just like, hey, you're a wrestler, how do I become a wrestler? Or I want to become a wrestler.
Before you even start looking for a school, start going to the gym. Get to know your body. Once you do find a school, Well, actually, before you even find a school, don't go with the first one that you find. Make sure you do your research. Make sure you look into, will this fit my needs? What's the schedule like? Because you don't want to commit to a class and then not be able to do it, and all of a sudden you're out $1,500.
If that, sometimes it's even more than that these days.
If that's not an issue for you and you make it past that, stay humble. Do not. It's blown my mind that you see people who have a match, like one match, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I don't need to help set up the ring. I don't need to do this. It's like, what? Like I can't see myself 10 years down the line not helping setting up a ring. Like that.
That's a good perspective to have. Yeah.
Like it's not because it's like, oh, paying your dues, but it's the right thing to do. And it's like, even if it's for selfish reasons where you want to make sure that the ring is set up, that you're going to be correctly, that you're working in. But something that David Mercury told me is that he's very well respected.
Yes.
And he has an aura about him that just demands respect, and Jay Lethal as well. But they say that when they see their trainers, they still walk up to him with their hands outstretched and their heads down, because it's a show of respect, and you never want to forget where you came from. So if I'm main eventing WrestleMania or Wrestle Kingdom, something like that, and I come across David Mercury, it doesn't matter if I just had the first ever 8-star match. I'm still gonna, what can I do for you, sir? What can I, what?
Because
how
you
can I
wouldn't
pay
be
you
there.
back? Exactly.
You would not be there if it wasn't for, never forget where you came from. And I want to go back to what you were saying about setting up rings. I completely agree with you. The team aspect should go as far as setting up the show, because the sooner the show's set up, the easier it is for everybody. The more time we get to work out our matches in the ring before the show starts. And nobody has to blow themselves up setting up or tearing down a ring. I mean, one of my biggest things about setting it up is I want to help, but I also don't want to go out there already looking blown up and sweaty as a referee before the show even starts. So I'm if everybody picks up one thing, and shows have 20, 30, 40 people on them sometimes. If everybody does one thing, that thing will get set up in no time.
Oh, yeah.
It will take no time. But when it comes down to 2, 3, 4 people, your job doesn't stop or only include what you do in the ring. It does everything backstage, from your arrival to your departure. The whole thing is your job. And yeah, the pay sucks, but why wouldn't you want to do it? Why? Yeah.
And that's one of the things that Jay especially instilled in us, is that no matter what, you touch that ring, you make sure that you are seen in some way helping out, because that's how he was trained. He taught us that just as much as good as you are in the ring, you have to be just as good outside of the ring.
Absolutely.
And that, I think as we're going through this interview, I keep thinking of things that Jay or Merc has said to me. I'm like, oh, that's, just these incredible things. They're just, so even if it's not people who directly influence training, guys like Eddie Torres.
Yep.
I don't think I've ever had any kind of training with him, but every time I see him, I understand he, especially here in ACW, places like that, he paved the way.
Yeah.
So it extends beyond the people who directly had that hands-on training experience with you, which goes to respecting the vets. But even if it's not a super well-known vet, anyone who's been involved in this business, you should be showing respect
But
to.
it's not, and that's at any level.
Any level.
The experience of somebody who's been in the business 2 years versus someone who's been in the business 15 years, that information is still important, because at one point, you're going to be the guy who's been in there 2 years, or you're going to be the guy who's been in there 15 years, and it's good to have those different perspectives to know kind of realistically what you're looking at coming ahead of you, because 15 years of bumping in the ring, you're bound to forget some stuff. That's dropping on your head, for 15 years. So it's good to ask everybody, even people in your own class, what did you feel about training? That's why I like doing these interviews, because I get to talk to people of all very levels of experience, and everybody brings something useful and something important to the table. So I'm glad that you actually said that it's respecting vets, but vets come in all shapes and sizes and durations.
Right.
Because life experience also plays a role in it too.
Yes.
If you could change one thing in the wrestling business, whether it's backstage, whether it's audience perception, whether it's, hell, the padding in the ring, it could be any element of the business, what would you change?
That's a difficult one. That's a real difficult one. I think
A lot of people say pay, but I feel like that's so cliche at this point. Yeah, who wouldn't want to make more money? That's obvious, but
you guys are getting paid for this? I didn't know that.
you'll get there soon, kid.
They just keep throwing hot dogs at me.
That's right.
I don't know. I think the perception sometimes that you come across where, like we were saying earlier, others have to do poorly for you to succeed. It's very rare. I've only never directly towards me, but I've seen it, and it's upsetting. It's like, why? It's like if you get in the ring and intentionally do something to make your opponent look foolish, that's not doing anything for you. That's just making you look like a jerk, or like you aren't good enough to be competing at a top level. Because if one person does poorly, everyone does poorly. But it's the green-eyed optimism in me is I just want everyone to get along.
Of course. But I also come from a generation. I was one of the last of the generations where participation trophies weren't a thing, where you won or you lost and you wanted to win.
Right.
So I think that competitive element does still need to exist to keep people hungry. I don't want to see that hunger go away. But I agree with you. It doesn't have to be at the expense of someone else.
Right.
Just be better than them.
Yeah. If someone's booked and you're not, it's okay to be competitive for bookings, to be competitive to be on the show, to be the best. But you don't need to Tanya Harding someone. Yeah.
No, or politic behind the scenes,
Right.
or I agree with you there.
If you are going to get to the top, it should be through hard work and genuine effort. And if someone beats you out for that, that just means, hey,
there's more work to do.
There's more work to do.
Absolutely. And that's, you work your way up the card, you work your way into better promotions, you work your way onto TV, and then you work your way up the card again. And like all those things, like it should be a never-ending path to do better and do more, because there are just as many other people, if not more, also thinking the same way.
The best example I can give of that is me and Wheezy. We're a tag team. We've had more matches as a tag team than we have as singles, but we do occasionally have matches as singles. He has had 2 or 3 more than me. That to me is like, okay, well, I got to catch up to Wheezy. But at the same time, if he's booked on a show and I'm not, I'm still going to come out and support my boy, because I want him to do well and I want wrestling to do well as a whole.
I'm actually going to do a bad interviewer thing and go back.
Sweet.
And actually ask you, your first match was against Jay Lethal and David Mercury.
Yes, it was.
That is a claim to fame that so few can make. I want you to talk about that experience. I can't believe I skipped it, but I want to come back to it and actually have you talk me through. My first match in a ring in front of people ever is against a Ring of Honor world champion and one of the biggest names in the Florida Indies. What was that like for you?
Well, it was at the Alex Perry Memorial Show. And the premise for it was Wheezy and I put out an open challenge. No one accepted, and we called out Jay and Merc. I've worked Merc at ACW separately, but working with Jay, that was the one experience I had working him. Probably the best wrestling experience I've ever had. I felt like I could have done that with my eyes closed, and he would have marionetted me to a good match, because he is so incredibly good in that ring. And not only that, but they took 2 green boys who had never had a match before, and not to toot our own horn or anything, but we had people coming up to us. They're like, "That was your first match? Like that's insane."
They made you look like $1 million, no question.
Yeah, I mean, we were just like, "Oh yeah, that's what we do." But in the back of our minds, we're like, "We had nothing to do with that." And they made us look so good. And the funny thing is, Jay was like, "Yeah, we'll do this. It'll make you guys look good." And Merc was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do this thing and kick you in the face really hard." And I'm like, "Oh, all right, cool." Like
there's those two perspectives again, right?
Yeah.
Merc's gonna make sure you get your lumps, but Jay's gonna make sure you look good while it's happening.
And the funny thing about that is that is what made me and Wheezy a tag team. Prior to that, in training, we'd never even considered it. We hadn't spoken about it, but they chose 2 students who they thought were capable of putting on a good match with them. And afterwards, me and Weezer were like, "Hey, do you want to keep doing this? Like, this works. Like, we get along well."
Well, yeah, and it works. I mean, I've seen it
yeah.
at several shows, and it's always really entertaining. So I'm glad that it is still a thing.
Yeah, but it was nerve-wracking. But as soon as I got in the ring, I knew, and he knew, that we were in good hands.
Absolutely, and it's a confidence boost too, because Jay has only worked a very small handful of students out of the probably 100 or so that he's had.
Right.
That's got to make you feel good and kind of almost like a reward for the work you've done, but also an inspiration for the work you still have to do.
Absolutely.
Because you want to return to that place, I'm sure, one day and fight Jay again.
Oh, absolutely. That's like, okay, this match was good. I want to come back to this however many years down the road and have an even better one.
Yeah.
We mess with him all the time. We're like, yeah, we want our rematch. Like, we're better now. And we're, but that's the goal, is to be at the level of someone like Jay Lethal and to be able to perform as well as he does and as well as Mercury does. But yeah, it was a real honor, and it was something I'll never forget. A hell of a way to debut.
God, yeah.
But
I'll leave off by asking you, what's the dream for you? Where do you want to be in, say, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Where do you see this road ending? Or not even ending, but heading through?
Ideally, I win some sort of lottery tomorrow, and some major company calls me up. They're like, "Yeah, we want you," and I'll be like, "All right, yeah, cool." And that's how that goes. But
is there a particular company or promotion that you want to work for, though? Because a lot of people say the E, and I feel like that is also kind of a generic answer. But it's always nice to me when someone says, "Well, I want to work New Japan," or "I want to work, Ring of Honor." Like that, the dream isn't just the E, because, like we were talking about with the Atmosphere, it's not the only name in town anymore.
Right.
So anyway, sorry, continue.
I mean, I don't have a specific promotion in mind. Hopefully by then I'll be following in the footsteps of guys like Troy Hollywood and Snoop Strikes, Hunter Law, those kinds of guys who are they are very big names already on the Florida independent scene, and they're continuing to make their way up. And I think that that's a good goal to set, is to be... I think that they've set a good pace. So if not signed to a company, I would like to at least be respected in the business. To know that I'm making some kind of impact and people know my name, and that I'm able to go out and consistently deliver good matches. That no matter where I am, whether I'm in front of 10 people or if I'm in front of 1,000, or more than that, hopefully, I just want to know that I'm putting on good matches. And that's really the dream. Ideally, I'd love to get $1 million contract somewhere, but
who wouldn't?
Right,
I mean, again, when it comes to money, who doesn't want to make their living doing this?
Right. But I would be just as content working in front of 20 people.
Yeah.
Because it's what I love, It's the boyhood dream come true. That whole thing.
It absolutely is. So I want to transition to a segment that Ref Tony Stabile has named Take It Home.
Okay.
I want you to promote anything you want to promote, plug your social media, promotions you like. This is your chance to get yourself over with the people out there. Go.
Hello, I'm Logan. Good to meet you. I would like to shout out all the Lethal guys, the guys who I'm training with, Wheezy, Christian Andrews, the guys who are starting to make their names. I want to shout out David Mercury, Jay Lethal especially, for being awesome. All the guys who surround that, Dax the Axe, who promotes Tampa Bay Pro Wrestling, for doing a great job with that. I'd like to say thank you to all the promotions that have had me, ACW, PBENT, Rocksteady, where I'm doing pretty good things over there. Social media. All I have. Facebook. Logan Cruz, CRUZ. And then on Instagram, Logan Cruz PW. Help me get more followers than Wheezy, because that would piss him off. That's a work, by the way. He doesn't really have asthma.
He told me it was a shoot. Is he working me?
He's working you. He's working you good.
What about Twitter? You got Twitter?
I don't have a Twitter.
Okay,
I should probably
fine.
make one.
It's helpful.
Yeah. I have more to say than, 280 characters?
It's gotten longer. It used to be 140.
Twitter coming soon.
Yeah, I mean.
Shout out to Turnbuckle Trash Talk. Shout out to Aaron Nova for being a great mentor and a great friend. I think
Nova's the man.
Nova's the man.
That it? Anything else?
I'm gonna piss someone off by not shouting them out.
Well,
Shout out to my mom.
Wheezy pissed you off, so it's pass it on.
I made him cry in a parking lot at 3:00 in the morning when.
That's a story for the next time
Okay,
we come
cool.
back. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me, Logan. Thank you guys for tuning in for another Interview Wednesday here on Turnbuckle Trash Talk, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.